people were constantly talking about who asked for a Man in Web movie, why make a Man in Web movie, why don't you just give us a Spider-Man movie? Like, the sentiment was what like that it's ridiculous to tell new stories. And that really bothered me, because like that's the death of the genre in general.
Hello, everyone. We are back again. The Eye of the Storm podcast. I'm here with my boys Daniel and Hervé.
Yo.
Hi.
How you guys doing? Good?
Pretty good. Episode 10.
Episode 10, yes. Episode 10. We're on the roll, man. We're consistent. But look, man, we already know what we're here to do today. It's going to be an interesting day, I believe, even though we haven't spoken to each other individually about this film. But before we even get into that, what's the best recent thing you guys have watched that you can plug our audience and me myself to, because I need to look for new things to watch this weekend?
I've gone old but gold again this week. So funny enough, I was actually watching Saltburn, recent movie. And it's actually not a bad movie. It's got Barry Keoghan in it, and he's kind of one of my favorite actors at the moment. He's been like good in everything that I've seen him in. If you've not watched The Banshees of Inisherin, that's a fantastic movie as well. But while I was watching the movie, it's kind of okay movie. On the TV in the background, Superbad came on, and I'm sure everyone must know what Superbad is. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, that's the end of this movie. I'm gonna go watch Superbad. So I went to watch Superbad, and that is the best thing I watched this week. That movie is flipping hilarious. That movie is an all-time classic, one of the best movies that Seth Rogen's done, in my opinion. And yeah, it's just a classic. I feel like most people will know what Superbad is. You don't need me to go into it, but best thing I've watched recently.
Danny G.
This week I watched Derry Girls, which is a comedy show on Netflix about a group of teenage girls in Northern Ireland in the early 90s, so in the last days of the Troubles. It's probably the funniest comedy I've seen in many years. It's just consistently funny and witty and fast-paced, and it's just overall wonderful. It's not perfect. There's 3 seasons of 8 episodes, and the last half of the 3rd season kind of drops off a little bit, where it gets a little bit less funny and a little bit more sentimental. And I thought the ending didn't exactly work, but at minimum, there's 2.5 seasons of excellent comedy. Like I've not laughed out loud that much in years, probably. It just works, and it's just great comedy.
Okay, good recommendation, guys. Well, what I watched recently, which I actually enjoyed, was Bob Marley's biopic, One Love. I actually watched that back to back with Madam Web on the same day. But yeah, this movie was good, man. Obviously, if you guys don't know Bob Marley, you should do know Bob. Well, to be fair, a lot of people might not know Bob Marley, but you know, Jamaica's biggest selling artist. Yeah, man, just pretty much his life on screen. I was very surprised how much I enjoyed the music, because a lot of his music was played. Sometimes it felt like it overshadowed the film, but they were played at the right time. And, you know, it's Bob Marley music. I never knew how enjoyable and good of a feeling his music can be. And I didn't really know how, you know, influential he was when it came to unification when it comes between countries, especially within his own country. Like, I didn't know he went through that much. It was very enlightening. The only problem I had with it was they weren't really showing his flaws. But to be fair, it is what it is, man. Like, it was overall still a good movie. I definitely go recommend to go and watch. And it's doing very, very well in the box office, which wasn't surprising, but it was surprising. But it was a really good movie. It was a feel good movie, and it's very, you know, refreshing and enlightening to see, you know how much of an impact someone's music can have in society, on the world. So yeah, man, I definitely say go and check that out.
So it's not that historically accurate from what you've said.
Well, I'm not too sure about his history, to be honest. So I'm just going in there as a spectator who doesn't know nothing, so I can't even answer that question. But if our new subscribers Jamaican, let us know in the chat.
Like a music historian or something.
Yeah, I've biopics anyways. They kind of do omit some of the truth at times as well. especially if it's being approved by a certain person's estate, like you've got the Michael Jackson movie coming up, stuff like that. They're going to want to portray the person in the best light possible, so it's to be expected. But as long as it's a good movie, who cares?
100%, I agree.
Actually, that's my thing with biopics. I want them to tell the actual story about the actual person. And that's why I generally don't watch them, because then I have to fact check everything, and I can't trust people to actually tell the real story. It was kind of the thing with I was briefly excited for the Napoleon movie, and then it came out that the director thinks historians are stupid, and that kind of was not a very that's an actual quote, and that's not a good starting point when you're making a historical movie. And it turns out it's not terribly historical, and as a result, I have no interest in watching it. So if I wanted to learn about Bob Marley's life, I would probably just read the Wikipedia article and stay away from biopics. But that's kind of just me.
I would go coming from. Personally, with me, is if the movie was bad and it wasn't accurate, I'd be pissed. But if the movie was not accurate, but it was an enjoyable film, then I don't mind. I'm very easygoing, but I do hear where you're coming from, Daniel, because it's one of them ones where it's like you want the full truth. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. But
you enjoyed the Ankle last week, though. So.
Yeah, I mean, there also I didn't know the history, so and I didn't go there to be educated about the history of wrestling. And I think if I was, then I would have more problems with the apparent liberties it took with the historical record. But that one also seems to be like those. In that particular case, it seems like the historical inaccuracies are kind of limited and don't substantially change the story. But sometimes they will just outright change who a person was, or omit large chunks of what they did to make them look better or worse. And at that point, it's neither educational nor entertaining, in my opinion. If you want to tell a fictionalized story, then you should present it as that, in my opinion. And to me, biopic always implies this is a real person and this is their story.
Okay.
Enough.
Well, guys, I think now it's the main event. Wow.
Man, this is going to be an interesting.
Wow.
It's going to be an interesting.
Oh, man.
So, Madam Web, Jonathan, I can't wait for you to tell us how much you love this movie, because I just know you're so opposite to how me and Daniel think. So, go on, Jonathan, tell us how much you love this movie.
It's like you're making me seem like such a contrarian to you guys. I'm not that at all. It's just, I think, okay, you know what? When it comes to Madam Web, Dakota Johnson, or director's vision, one of them is at fault for Madam Web's portrayal. I think this movie, I felt like this movie was presented as a film they just wanted to get out of the way. It wasn't bad. It wasn't as bad as people were saying it was, but like I said, it was a film where they just weren't passionate about this film whatsoever. I even think, the character Dakota, is that how you pronounce her name, Dakota?
Mm-hmm.
The main actress, yeah. Mm-hmm. The way she performed in this movie, she didn't feel like she should have been Madam Web, and I feel like she didn't even want to be Madam Web. And that's why I said the whole, is it her fault or is it the director's fault? Like, was it the director's vision's fault? Because it's like I said, I'm new to Madam Web, so I don't really know her backstory. I don't know what her character's like. I don't know what her personality's like. What I do know is from the 2-minute video that Daniel showed me, the animation version where Spider-Man encountered Madam Web, and in that character, from her, I already had that preconceived notion that she was gonna be like this, right? She was gonna be like that. She seemed a bit more energetic, a bit more witty, and a bit more clever, especially with her responses to Spider-Man. So with Dakota, the way that she, performed as Madam Web, she seemed very zen, and it didn't work for me. Like the whole zen Madam Web, who seems she wasn't like an airhead, but at the same time, she had that personality where she didn't really care, and she was kind of like closed off. And I was like, I don't know how. I'm not really feeling, this. I'm not really feeling the way, the vision that they had for this Madam Web. But look, it wasn't that bad, man. It was an average movie. It's one of those films that you will forget I like to say it's a popcorn film. It's just one of those movies where you just go, well, to be fair, popcorn films are enjoyable. So this wasn't This was it's an okay experience, man. It's an okay experience. I'd probably say this is like no, it's not even a date night film. This is just a movie that you go and watch where you have nothing, you don't really have much to do. But it was an okay film. It wasn't bad. You know what I'm saying? Because people tried to say that this movie was worse than they tried to say that this film made what was the new Captain America film? Was it the Marvels, right?
Mm-hmm.
They try to say that this film made the Marvels look like an Oscar award-winning film. I said, hell no, you lot are crazy. I did not like the Marvels, unfortunately. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to the actors, you know what I'm saying, the actresses. It wasn't their fault. It's just, superhero fatigue, man. I'm joking, but yeah, overall this movie it's okay. It's not as bad as everyone's describing it, but at the same time, it's a forgettable film. Yeah.
So go ahead.
We'll save you to last.
I can hear the guns coming back.
So, Sony, thank you very much for Spider-Man 1, for Spider-Man 2, for Into the Spider-Verse, for Across the Spider-Verse. Thank you very much for the Amazing Spider-Man movie as well. But it's enough. It's time to pack it up. We're done. We're finished. We do not need any more movies from the Sonyverse at all. Like this, and again, I agree with you. It's not offensively bad. It's like, no, it's not like, get online and shout about like the movie being sort of that bad, but they're not trying.
Wait, that's not what we're doing now?
No.
Yeah. That's why I'm here.
Okay. We'll get to you. Don't worry. But they're not trying. They're not trying to tell a good story. They're not trying to get like the best writers in the room to sort of to like create a well-crafted sort of movie. They're not recruiting the best actors for this movie. Like, we'll get onto the villain, like one of the worst actors I've ever seen in my entire life on the screen. He was awful. We'll shout about him. We'll shout and scream about him. He was dog shit in my opinion.
Sorry, I don't think it was his fault, but carry on.
It was like everything about this movie was so subpar, and it's just like, what are we doing? Like, why are we churning out such horrible movies? Like, where is the disconnect? Where's the it's not like you don't have evidence, or you don't have things that you can reference to that have worked in previous sort of movies. You've got like 15 years of Marvel movies now. You've got like DC movies that have worked. You've got like Batmans and stuff like that. You can see what works and what doesn't work. So what are we doing? And I don't understand why so many female writers and female directors can't write competent female characters. It baffles me. It honestly baffles me. It's like they don't understand how to give the character, good nuance. They don't have to give the character,
Aren't the writers two men?
Sorry?
Aren't the writers two men? Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless.
Two men? Are they two men? Okay, well, yeah. They
two of the four. So just for accuracy.
Just for accuracy. Okay, I was incorrect on that. But
I think what they do is they when it comes to female leads, like I said, they present them with just terrible stories. Oh, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, I mean, terrible stories, terrible, you can even have like a not as strong movie, but you can have like interesting and nuanced characters that can carry the movie through, and we're just not getting that here in this movie. It's like, again, like now that I'm thinking about it, I'm getting a little bit more worked up about it. Whereas before, like while I watched it, it was very forgettable. I was like, okay, whatever. Like if you think too much about the movie, you'll have so many questions and none of it makes sense, and it's all stupid, to be honest. But I don't like. We'll move on to Daniel, but it's just a subpar movie. It's so subpar, man.
So when I watched the movie in the first half or so, I actually had kind of a good time. It wasn't exactly good, but I kept waiting for it to become as bad as everybody was saying. And I famously almost liked Morbius. So I was kind of expecting for me to fall off the bandwagon at any point and walk away actually kind of liking this movie. And then we got to the midway point, the diner scene, And that's where I said, okay, that's what I've been hearing about. And from there, it just fell off a cliff. And does anybody here remember the Simpsons scene where Homer, I think he wants to skateboard over a canyon and he falls down and he hits every rock on the way down. Yeah. And then when the ambulance brings him up again, they drop him and he falls on he hits every rock again. And this happens like 3 times. This was that movie, the second half of that movie. And the more I thought about it, and especially leaving the cinema and thinking about it a little bit in preparation for this, I kept getting more and more upset about the movie. Not because of anything that happened in it or any specific performance or anything like that. I'm upset about Sony thinking this was a movie and that they should charge us for it. Like, this is, in any other industry, this would be a product recall and we would get our refunds, and if we didn't get refunds, there would be a class action lawsuit. That is how bad this movie is, right? I'm not talking about what the character should have been or who should have been cast or who should have written it. I'm talking about, this is not a movie. We can talk about the specifics in the spoiler section, but like, I've never seen such bad ADR, such bad editing, such obvious stitching together of movie parts in order to make a story, because 3 years into making the movie, they changed what the movie was about. Like, there's not even a point talking about ratings or recommendation or who this is for and who should see it or who might enjoy it. It's just not a functioning movie. More so than any other, I kind of retroactively have to apologize to Zack Snyder, because the Rebel Moon at least had a story, and it was clearly a movie, and this does not rise to that level. That's my review.
Dan, you actually surprised me, because I thought you might, not to offend you because you had some strong words there, but I thought that you might come here and say that you liked it a little bit. And just to add,
I have nice things to say about individual bits and pieces, but not the movie as a whole.
Okay.
As I said, this is not fit for purpose. This should be recalled, and they should publicly apologize.
You know what? Let's do the individual pieces that we liked. What did we like about it before we get?
Okay, so I like Cassandra Cain as a person. It was, I think, the first time in many years that I kind of related to the protagonist of a superhero movie. Just like this is completely subjective. I'm not talking about the performance, just who she is as a person. Now, I don't think her character arc really works, because the movie doesn't justify why she's such a misanthrope and so socially awkward, because by all accounts, even though she grew up with foster parents, she keeps talking about how she had a good experience in the foster system. So it's not like she's scarred by lifelong abuse or anything like that, but she's still distant from everybody, doesn't want anything to do with anybody, just wants to be on her own. And then she makes this big change towards being towards risking her life to save these 3 women from Ezekiel Sims, but that is not really justified. Like, she doesn't really struggle with that idea, or she doesn't really need to try to pawn off the responsibility to somebody else, and it keeps failing, and so she, out of a sense of obligation, does it herself. We also don't know why somebody with this outlook on life becomes a paramedic, because I know people who work in not as EMTs but as like in healthcare, and you don't do this just for the paycheck. You do this because it's your calling, right? Because it's extremely draining and difficult and dangerous and risky, and you take on huge responsibility, and you don't do this when you try to not care about people. So all of those pieces don't really work together, and the movie doesn't even try to harmonize them. I'm just saying, just in individual scenes, like in the baby shower scene, I kind of related to her. Like, she was stuck in this social obligation that she wanted nothing to do with. And
she shouldn't have been there. Like, this is one of my problems with the movie. You shouldn't have been, like, who invites a colleague to your sister's baby shower? Like, it just, like, she shouldn't have been there.
That's kind of details. My point is just, like, there were individual moments where I kind of was on one wavelength with Cassandra Web, just as a person.
Fair.
And that doesn't happen most of the time with these characters. And for the most part, superhero protagonists don't need to be this. Like, I like Bruce Wayne, I like Tony Stark, I like Clark Kent, I like all these characters, and they have nothing to do with me, right? I don't have to relate to them. Steve Rogers as well. they're just interesting people on their own, right? And they do the things they do for interesting reasons. But with Cassandra Cain, it kind of felt familiar, like a real person. And that's outside the plot and outside the performance and outside the characterization. Just as the kind of person to front a superhero movie, it was kind of a refreshing change of pace. And then the second one was that the movie is not resolved with a fight scene. And then the third one is that the movie gives her a very specific skill set, and that skill set is used throughout the movie, and she doesn't randomly gain action hero or action hero badass powers. Those are things that movies have a tendency to do, especially these kinds of movies, and the movie doesn't do that. And I appreciate it for all of those reasons. And that's pretty much the extent of the positives, but I just wanted to mention them because underneath all the production issues and the rewrites and the reshoots and the world's worst ADR and all of that, there were bits and pieces of there that kind of was a movie that kind of did everything I want a movie like this to do. And this whole thing about how they don't fight the villain, they just use her superpowers to basically survive him. That was kind of there, but not fully. But to the extent that it was there, it was a refreshing change of pace. And if this had been a functioning movie, it would, I think, have gotten a lot of praise for trying something different. So there are positives here. They just buried under the fact that it's not a real movie.
Hey, what about you? What did you like?
I do.
End of speech.
Huh?
End of speech.
I don't think this movie has many redeeming qualities. I mean, I understand the points that Daniel's made, and it's quite interesting, like hearing his perspective on the positives of it. But for me, there's very little to like about the movie at all. So if we're talking just positives at the moment, you can kind of skip me, and then we can get on to the other stuff afterwards.
So do you disagree with my positives? Either that they exist or that if they existed, they would be positives.
I understand why you like the fact that there wasn't like this big like fight scene at the end to like sort of to conclude like one big like epic final battle or whatever like that, and the fact that she was like using her powers and stuff like that. Yeah, it was somewhat interesting, but I just don't feel it was like done well. I'm
not saying that. I'm just saying the fact that it was there at all was refreshing.
Yeah, but the fact that it's just there is like bare minimum. To me, it's like bare minimum. It's like, okay, you've got like this good idea. Okay, can you like flesh it out and actually like do it really well, please?
Yeah. Have either of you seen Edge of Tomorrow?
No.
Also known as Live, Die, Repeat. It's basically it's a Tom Cruise sci-fi movie from I think 10 years ago.
Oh. Yes.
The basic idea is that it's a future in which there's been an alien invasion, and through a sequence of events, the Tom Cruise character and one other soldier are trapped in a time loop where they live through the day of a big battle, and every time they die, the day resets, and they have to live through the day again. And every time this happens, they kind of remember what killed them last time, and they know how to avoid it. So they can't actually beat the aliens, but over time they learn how to. They basically learn how like what set of moves will avoid being killed, and until they get to the end of the day. And that's where they can fulfill their mission. And this was kind of what this movie was trying to ape, but it didn't. It didn't really, and it didn't do so successfully. But in the one or two places where it did, it felt like a kind of compelling movie. Like the diner scene where she tries to save the girls from Sims and tries to save them and gets killed, and so she resets and does it again. Like there was only one loop. But if there had been 3 or 4, and every time she got a little bit further, that would have been really, 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 really impressive. And all they had to do was rip off a 10-year-old Tom Cruise movie, and it would have been wonderful.
All they did with that scene is just make something that didn't make sense again. It's like the first time she does it, she runs across from the woods to the diner and gets there before Equal Samuels gets there. The second time she drives a car and manages to get there way after him, and it's just like, okay, that didn't make sense.
That's a detail that doesn't add up. Yeah, but I mean, just in general, like the fact that they did the time loop at all is that was kind of the part where I said, oh, now we're starting to use the powers in interesting ways.
Yeah, but then that's again to me, like I understand why you like it. I completely understand why you like it. To me, it seems like it's just like bare minimum.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm not like they didn't get there, right? They didn't actually do it successfully. I'm just saying it with all the pieces were there, and at some point they were clearly planning on doing this, and then plans changed, and the movie changed, and they did something else.
Okay. So in fairness to the writers and to the actors in this movie, do we feel like the studio interference kind of took us away from having like a really good, compelling Madam Web movie? Or
I think this is entirely Sony's fault. Like I don't know much about the director. I know she's never directed a feature film before, but she has directed a whole bunch of TV over like 2 decades at least, if not more. I don't like I have no opinion about her as a person or professionally or anything like that. I've seen some of the stuff, some of the episodes she's directed and not others, and don't really have a strong opinion. But point is, working that job must be a nightmare because you are completely at the mercy of the company changing its mind every couple of months, and then you like everything you've done kind of gets scrapped, and you have to do it over again. Like I don't think the direction is very good. I think the performances are very good, and I think even with this kind of headshot job, you could have had individual good scenes. But so I don't think I'm not gonna either put her or Dakota Johnson off the hook entirely. But I don't think it was possible to make a coherent movie. Even the most like give this movie to Christopher Nolan, and he would have done a bad job under those circumstances.
Yeah, I feel like one of the evidence of like the studio meddling is, again, like I think I was alluding to it in the baby shower scene, is just the constant wanting to refer to Spider-Man in like the littlest ways. It's like none of it is relevant in the movie, none of it drives the plot forward, none of it like contributes anything to the movie, but you know they have to force Ben Parker in there, they have to force a reference to Aunt May in there, they have to reference like that like the woman's pregnant and the kid's going to be Peter Parker, and none of it
make a big deal out of the fact that it's Peter Parker, but they're not going to say his name, and it's all very tedious.
And it's just like it's just like it's just taken, it's just like a distraction, and it's taken away. And then when you get to like stuff like the end sequence where obviously they're using the technology to try and find the girls, and obviously she's kept them at Ben Parker's house, and is it Mary Parker, Peter Parker's mum? Is her name Mary Parker?
I think it's Mary, yeah.
It's Mary Parker, yeah. So obviously her water breaks, and it's like, okay, Ben Parker can quite easily go and take her to the hospital himself. But
yeah, I understand he doesn't want to leave them alone.
But the teenagers,
it's probably the lesser evil, but yeah, it's
teenagers, they're in danger. Obviously, like there's like this sense of like they need to stay here, or whatever, like that. It's like you can just leave them at home. You do not need to take them to wherever. And it's just like
a hospital where there's cameras everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah. And it's just like it was done too conveniently for them to be spotted, for them to have like the sort of the final act of sort of the showdown with Ezekiel Samuels. So I don't know, stuff like that, you know, really just like grinds my gears. Like it's just like that studio interference in terms of like wanting to constantly have these Spider-Man references instead of, again, just trying to make a solid good movie, like having the Madam Web character, having these 3 different Spider-Women, and thinking about how you can make a good movie out of them, as opposed to trying to do these cheap things to try and get people in the cinema because you've referenced Peter Parker or you've referenced, you know, Ben Parker or something like that.
I kind of would have liked, not exactly an after credit scene, I think those are way overdone and almost never add very much, but like a scene at the very end where she kind of maybe communes with Peter Parker or remembers a conversation she will have with Peter Parker in 20 years, like something like that, right? Something that connects it like to that. But if they had it left at that, I would have been fine with it. But yeah, this making it like, what is it, like 20% of the runtime is just focused on the Parkers, something like that. Complete nonsense. I saw a rumor somewhere, I don't know if there's any evidence for that, is that it was supposed to be a prequel for the Garfield Spider-Man. And that changed at some point, and that's why they had to change it from the 90s to the 2000s so that it lines up with the Tom Holland Spider-Man age-wise. So like there's a whole bunch of stuff in the movie that makes clear it's supposed to be in the 90s, and then but they keep saying it's 2003, and that creates a bunch of plot holes. Notably, after 2 years after 9/11, can you just fly to Peru when you're wanted for kidnapping? Maybe not. At minimum, if you set a movie in 2003 and you have, that should be a plot point maybe. But basically that's one of the examples of the movie just being redone midstream, where originally it was supposed to be a prequel to one Spider-Man, and then they changed it to another Spider-Man, but now that Spider-Man is 10 years younger, and so all the timeline doesn't add up, so you have to pretend it's in a different era than it's filmed in, and like that's just one exhibit 57B of how this movie is messed up.
Yeah. Is that part of the reason why Ezekiel Samuels never says any of his lines on camera, because they had to like reshoot and rework all of his lines, and not reshoot because they clearly didn't reshoot it to put his like lines on camera, but it's like 90% of what he says is off camera. They're focused on something completely different, and I've never seen anything like that in a movie before. And it was extremely jarring to see that, to like have a person, and like the voiceover was like, you can clearly hear it was like dubbed, the way he was like. And do you know what's funny is like I was like similar to you in terms of like, there was like, when I first went into the movie, I was like, okay, this is gonna be a cut movie, so I went into it like wanting, like expecting to hate it. It got to a point where I was like, okay, maybe this is not as bad a movie as people are saying. As soon as he showed up on screen, when he was like in bed with the CIA agent or like whatever, sort of national security woman, whatever.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
As soon as he started speaking in that scene, the movie went completely different for me. It was
at a completely different volume, in a different like inflection, and it was very clear. I normally don't notice ADR, unless it's pointed out to me, and you couldn't not notice it here.
Yeah,
and that goes into my comment of it not being fit for purposes, because even if you retool a movie like this as that often, there's still no excuse for the ADR to be that bad.
No,
like this came across like this gave me flashbacks to like me writing lab reports in my first year of university, and it's 2 a.m. and it's due at 8 a.m. and I'm taking shortcuts because I didn't manage my time properly, right? That's how it felt, and at that point it should have been either delayed or scrapped entirely, but just putting it out like that is just it goes beyond. Like I use the word baffling a lot on this channel, and this like I'm out of words for, like I should have reserved that word for something like this. Like I'm out of vocabulary. It's like the fact that anybody, any paid professional who has ever been involved in a film project before thought that this is how it should be done and how it should look and sound is beyond unacceptable.
Yeah, it's negligible. Just to say, it's negligible. I mean, in terms of like the 3 Spider-Women, like their involvement in the film, again, it seems like they're just there as a plot point. Essentially, they're just there to like drive the movie forward. Again, there's nothing really about them. They try to give them some type of like unique character for each of the different.
But each one had one personality trait.
Yeah, essentially.
What I will say about that is, that's actually like for me is that this was probably one of the first superhero films I've watched in not a long time, but quite a while, where I felt the performance felt very more authentic than theatrical. Because the superhero movies that I have watched, especially like last year, they were very theatrical. This one felt a bit more genuine, even though it wasn't. I wouldn't say it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. But it was satisfactory. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think
I kind of got like Star Wars prequel vibes from it, where I've seen these actors say lines better than this, and I know they can act when given half a chance. But like I don't know if it's the directing or whatever. But everybody was operating at 30%.
I honestly believe it was the dialogue, even with the villain, because I don't think the villain was a bad actor. I just think what they gave him was just so bad, man. Like even I was hearing his lines, I was like, Jesus Christ! Like why would they make him say this? Like, you know what I'm saying?
No one speaks like that.
Exactly, no one speaks like that. So it makes it seem like the actors, the actors just didn't care. And maybe with Dakota as well, like I said, for me personally, she didn't fit too well with Madam Web as a character, even though I'm not too familiar with the backstory. But at the same time, I can give her the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, this lies on the director's vision and obviously the dialogue that's being given to her, because this just isn't great, man. It sounds very like, just no one speaks like this. No one's
What frustrates me as well is like, I can't even remember what the black girl's name is, one of the Spider-Man, the black one.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, Betty. It's like they always have to make like the black one. They always have to make the black, like the teenagers in general, like black, white, whatever, like that, obnoxious or like something like that. They have to have like some type of attitude and go against the grain and this and the other. But her in particular, they always have to have like some type of like sassy or like whatever attitude for like the black teenager in the movie. And I'm like, okay, like there is like 100 different ways that you can portray a black teenager like in a movie, but it just seems like it's just like the sassy, like super confident, like like powerful. I don't know. It's just like it's not realistic, and it's like it's really annoying having like especially as a black person seeing our people being portrayed one way over and over and over again in movies. It just drives me crazy, man.
Yeah. Even with what's a bit mad as well, even with Sydney Sweeney, Sydney.
Yeah.
Even with her character, it was a bit of a contradiction because she came off of like they presented her as someone that was a bit timid, but timid and shy. But the way like they had her dressing in that film, I was like, this doesn't really look like a timid girl whatsoever. Like you lot have portrayed this girl completely wrong. Like she had a proper like short skirt, like a like the only thing that made her look like timid and shy was the glasses. And as soon as she took off the glasses, apparently that's when she transitions into this confident girl that's jumping on the tables and singing. I'm like, listen, the team, the production. I honestly do believe this was Sony. You guys done this cast so dirty. It's just unbelievable. I feel sorry for them that they actually had to do this, even though they're not gonna turn this down, man. It's a freaking, in a sense, Marvel is a superhero film. They're not gonna turn this down, but they did them dirty with the script, man.
Also, like another like character trait that I dislike, again, like for the Latina like Spider-Woman, like again, Daniel, if you remember.
Well, I've got the Wikipedia page up. That's why I know the names. You're talking about Julia. Sorry, no, Anya. Anya is.
Anya. Yeah, it's like, oh, she's Latina. Oh, let's make it that her parents have been deported, and it's like, okay, like we get it. We've seen that 1,000 times. Like,
in fairness, that was a big topic in the mid 2000s.
Yeah. But it's like it's not like
it's the obvious thing to go
to, and it's like it's borderline racist if you ask me. To be like every Mexican parent is being deported. Like what's going on? But again, it's like her. It's like they just have like these like stereotypes that they like buy into when they're writing some of these characters, and it's like no, like can you not think of anything else? Can you not write a different kind of character? Like have better ideas for these characters, please. Is all I'm asking.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, so the three Spider-Women, I'm a little bit torn about that. Like, I'm not saying they're good or anything, but they're supposed to be annoying teenagers and they're supposed to be irresponsible. But I feel like there's ways to make that more fun to watch, as opposed to just grating. Like, I understood, for instance, why they went to the diner and didn't listen. I didn't understand why they started dancing on tables.
Yeah.
For example, like there's a line there, like where some of it is on one side of the line, but most is on the other side of the line. Yeah.
So like again, sorry. Back to the diner scene. The person that called the police on the girls that were supposedly missing, like he didn't think like these are 3 girls that are by themselves. They've gone to the diner. They're ordering food. They're having a good time or whatever. And like obviously you've seen on the news that they're kidnapped. You don't think to go and speak to them first, you have a conversation with them like that. Your first thought is, I'm going to call the police. And again, it's just a convenient point to then, like Ezekiel Samuels is tapped into like the police, like the police line. He hears this and he knows where the girls are, and it's just stupid writing. If you ask me, it's just like convenient writing for the plot to move forward.
Yeah.
Mostly like writing.
I mean, I can see somebody doing that, maybe, but it is convenience.
Yeah.
It is just there to get the villain into the right spot. Like all of it is very convenient, right? The fact that they're all in Grand Central Station at the same time for unrelated reasons, as opposed to the plot bringing them together, right? Fate is a theme in this, right? Mm-hmm. And I completely buy that, they meet by coincidence for some reason, but not maybe all at the same time in the same in the same train, like with 2 seats of it. Like there is even in a movie about fate, there's a line of contrivance, and they've done like a far jump over that line, and they landed all the way over there.
So what next for them? Like, what next for Sony?
Well, Craven, next thing. And Venom 3 is supposed to come out this year as well.
Oh my god.
Well, I mean, we haven't really talked about the bad parts of the plot yet.
Have we?
Well, we still have like half an hour to go through. So for me, the diner scene is where it really started to fall apart. Like there were bad aspects of it before in the first half or so, but it was mostly passable. Or it was at least like a 4 out of 10 movie, 3 out of 10 or something, and then it really fell apart in the second half. And the diner scene was where the first cracks started showing, and then after that, like when Cassandra just goes home to get her mother's journal, that scene was beyond contrived, and actually kind of like the bit where she just makes sure if she can crawl on walls. That was like the one creative part in the movie. And this whole like being embarrassed and saying saying to her cat, let's not mention that to anybody. Like I didn't laugh out loud, but it's the obvious joke, but it's also a joke. But everything else about that scene where she like this whole people have been memeing about exposition to cats, where she just explains the plot to her cat, so that because there's nobody else around, it's just like obviously she has to get to the notebook and she has to like learn this stuff, but like I could write a script that did that more elegantly. Like they didn't have to go into the forest. Like they could have, I don't know, gone to her apartment or something. It's like 2003. It's not like there's an Alexa listening to everything they're saying. Like stuff is less networked. Like this is pre-social media, right? There's like also, this.
Sorry. Also, like about like a whole like notebook thing. It's like this is your mother's research that you've kept for like your whole life. Telling me you never read it and you never like understood about like this spider thing that she was like researching and how it could potentially give people spider powers or whatever like that.
Up until that point, there was no reason for her to take an interest.
But she would have. But she like if you had that connection to like I mean at the end of the movie they kind of imply that she had this like hatred for her mum for like wanting to go into like the rainforest.
Yeah.
So you.
That's the reason not to read her notebooks, right? Like I understand that she couldn't bring herself to throw it away, but she also didn't exactly want to read that, especially considering that she's not a scientist. Like I can understand her wanting to hang on to it and also not wanting to engage with it very much, or maybe planning to do it one day, but putting it off and procrastinating about it. It is obviously very convenient that the entire plot is explained in the notebook and she just has it, and that she just explains it to herself by reading it just by skimming it for 10 minutes. Like there are much more elegant ways of doing this. Like for instance, by bringing the girls into her apartment and saying, somebody mentions something and that reminds me of something I once read when I skimmed over my mother's notebook. When she was in the red or whatever, right? It would be trivially easy to come up with a better way of doing that exposition. Just the fact that she has the notebook and hasn't read it before, I don't think that is the problem. The problem is just that the entire sequence is extremely clumsy and lazy.
True. For me, it's a problem she hadn't read it because it's the only thing that you've had of your mother's your whole life, and you haven't been curious enough to know what she was doing in the rainforest and stuff like that. But I can see that we could see that differently, but it doesn't make sense. Also, well, are you kind of continuing past?
Well, yeah, I mean, and then next up is the whole I'm gonna go to Peru for a week. Mm-hmm. That was just very, very clearly injected into the plot afterwards, or very late into the process. I don't imagine that was planned from the start, because it's so. Not only is it dumb, it's also really, really again clumsy and lazy. Like that is basically we're going to do the obvious thing in the most abbreviated and direct way, right? She just flies to Peru, even though she's wanted for kidnapping, and then wanders into the jungle, like takes a bus, which knows exactly where to go, walks around for 10 minutes, Obviously, probably a day or something, but it's portrayed as being very easy. And then she finds a guy who's been waiting for her for 30 years and who recognizes her immediately, and then who just shows her to the exposition cave, where she has a vision of where her mother explains the plot to her and the cosmology in about 2 minutes, and then she flies back. It's just the least interesting. Like, going to Peru is already dicey, right? From a logistical standpoint, but doing it in this abbreviated and effortless way it just screams laziness, and it screams it screams like, well, we have 20 minutes to fill in, we couldn't do the subplot we wanted to do, so we now have to do this other thing. Aside from being the clumsiest exposition I've ever seen, probably, it just really dragged on the movie, and it made it really apparent that it got inserted into the plot because they couldn't do what they were originally going to do, because somebody had told them to make a different movie halfway, like 2 years into the process.
But it makes sense as well in terms of, like, it doesn't explain why her or her mother was special for her to be saved in the first place, for them to know that she's going to come back in the future or whatever. So, like, people were meant to be like kind of like secluded. They're meant to be like, you know, kind of kept away. They're meant to be like this like myth or whatever. And they come out to save this white woman that's been researching them and trying to like maybe like come and like steal one of their like spiders, which is possibly meant to be like sacred to them, whatever. Save her, bring her to the water, give her a spider bite, save the baby, send the baby back to the America somehow. It's not explained how she gets to America, but it's not really important.
They did show like a Peruvian birth certificate. So apparently the spider tribe handed them to the Peruvian authorities, and then it's kind of implied that they then handed it to the U.S. embassy, and then, you know, that part I kind of like. You have to pay really attention when she goes through goes through her suitcase. There's a Peruvian birth certificate.
Yeah.
So like at some point she made it back to the city. It was handed to the authorities.
Yeah, but it's like my overall point was, it's not really explained why she was the special one or the chosen one, essentially. And obviously I get like she's Madam Web and she's like meant to be on the web and she's meant to be like all seeing and stuff like that, but the movie doesn't give you enough information to explain the importance of her and, like, you know, why it was imperative for them to save her mother and to save her as a child, essentially, knowing them, especially them knowing the future.
I just saw it as a gift. Like, I get what you're saying, but because I think they kind of covered that as well when he said, well, the guy who saw after 30 years said, I think he said something about how they saw a dying mother, and obviously they said her intentions for getting the spider, which was pure, to cure sicknesses, etc. So I didn't necessarily see that as, I saw that as the explanation. So pretty much she was just a lucky one, and obviously, the tribe couldn't let a pregnant woman couldn't let a pregnant woman die. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think it was just pretty much, it was just a gift. You know what I'm saying? She was the lucky one.
Well, I think that their whole deal seems to be that they use the spider powers to help people, right? Which often means like driving out people who are maybe illegally logging in the.
Is that explained in the movie? Again, sorry if I missed it. Is that explained in the movie that they're using these spiders to help people?
There's lines about it where they say basically they have they have the powers of spiders, and they basically use it to protect the rainforest, kind of thing. And then when Cassandra's mother is dying from the gunshot wound, they immediately come out of the trees and carry her to safety, which kind of seems to me communicated pretty clearly that helping people is their thing. That's what they think they should be doing with the powers. And then in the cave, they basically say, well, we can't save you, but we can save your child, that kind of thing, and we'll make sure she's okay. So just helping people seems to be their entire deal. And that might have something to do. So they probably observed that expedition, and they figured out that their motive for studying the spiders was not profit, but to create medicines. And they might have identified with that. So I didn't see a contradiction there exactly. It's not interesting, and there's no nuance to it. But I didn't think there was a contradiction there. And also, if they have prophetic powers and know what's going to happen, then they might know that her child will inherit the powers and will do good things with them, maybe. So maybe they see that as an extension of their work. It's not stated, and it requires a bit of interpretation, but I don't think it's a big leap, not even for spider people.
Fair. Well, in that case, what they decided to do with it was boring and not. I feel like they could have probably taken it a complete different direction. That whole setup, in my opinion. Like, and again, it's like a common trope of like having the chosen one or whatever, like or whatever, you know, like your Harry Potter.
Although when you're dealing with like literal psychics, then chosen ones are kind of iffy, because if you see that you're going to be the hero and therefore you become the hero, that's not really being a chosen one in that same way.
It's like Doctor Strange in his first movie, where like she knows that he's gonna come eventually, and he's like the one that's meant to save them all. Like he's like still the chosen one.
Yeah.
And she can see that he will
That's when you're doing the choosing is my kind of thing. It's like you just fast forward it to the future and you see what's going to happen. So I don't really have a problem with them treating her as special, because this happens probably only once, and they kind of see what's going to come of it, and they approve of how she's going to use her powers, so they help her. I think that's okay. It's still not what I would have wanted in the movie. I think that entire sequence should have been something else. But given with what it is, I think that part kind of makes sense.
Wait, what dreams was the villain actually seeing? Because the girls didn't end up killing him. So what exactly, like, did Madam Web alter his reality or his future, or?
Yeah, so that's a thing, right? The way the powers work changes in every scene. And I actually really like the first version of it, where it's basically a heightened version of Spider-Man's Spider-Sense, where basically being in danger or believing that she's in danger causes her to revert back into the past so that she can avoid the danger, right? It's like Spider-Man's Spider-Sense dialed up to 11. And I kind of like that she got one of Spider-Man's powers, but that one at the fullest potential. Whereas with Spider-Man, the Spider-Sense is kind of a tertiary power. And I kind of like that. There was a nice bit of kind of symmetry. But that only worked like twice, and then it kept changing how it works. So yeah, I mean, Sim says he has been trying everything, and he just keeps getting these visions. But then, like you say, like they kind of change the future because he dies in other ways. He dies through product placement, right? Like it's the best kind of product placement, right? I can just imagine like the meeting between Pepsi and Sony, and they've worked out that there's going to be product placement, and they're hashing out the deals, and the Pepsi rep just says, yeah, I want our product to kill somebody, and then the Sony rep says, yeah, well, we've been thinking about that because our protagonist isn't a fighter, so we have been wondering about how to end the story, and then the Pepsi guy says, I want our logo to kill him and make it 10 meters tall and covered in explosions. And that's how the movie ends. And the Sony rep says, "Yep, that's great. We're gonna roll with that." So I like that.
You know what? One thing I can kind of not applaud Sony for, but kind of like commend them in a way for, is because I can see that they did have a plan for Madam Web. I don't kind of respect the fact that they're pulling the plug now, because apparently there was an article where they're literally pulling the plug on Madam Web, where there's not going to be another one. But I could see that they had a plan to try and continue this film, her character, because obviously they didn't reveal how the three girls end up being superheroes, but they implied that they were going to become superheroes, which tells us, okay, it was going to be a second movie. So, you know, at least they tried to do something which a lot of these other, what a lot of the superhero movies have been given to us, like I mentioned before in our Monday topics, were just experimental. This one is like they had a plan, but it just,
They changed the plan. They had a plan and they changed it 5 times. And we're getting pieces of all 5 plans.
Yeah, but they still had a plan. Do you know what I'm saying? They still had a plan. I'm sure with these other films that we've seen, there's no plan. It's just, okay, let's just see if they're going to like this character. You know
also, all the other Sony movies are completely standalone. Right? They say it's a franchise or it's a connected universe, but it isn't actually. Venom never influences what happens in Morbius. Morbius doesn't influence what happens in Madam Web.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen Craven yet, but I imagine it'll be the same. So these are, in fact, standalone movies, no matter what they say.
Yeah.
There's the potential for them to bring together, but there's no indication that they've heard of each other or that the events of one movie impact what the events in another. And this seems like it wasn't supposed to tie into like Venom or something. It seems like they were kind of trying to tie into any Spider-Man they could get their hands on, whichever one, couldn't get away fast enough.
And this was like an origin story of an origin story, basically, because she didn't really get like, obviously, like her comic book like her comic book like traits in terms of like her being blind and her being in a wheelchair and stuff like that until the very end of the movie, which then kind of leads into like the next movie or whatever, like which they were potentially planning. And like the whole way that she actually ends up blind and disabled is the stupidest way I've ever seen it done in my entire life. She's like,
it's very obligatory. It just happens.
Yeah, it just happens. She gets hit with a firework while she's in the water. She reacts to being hit by the firework and then goes back.
The whole thing is avoiding the firework.
Yeah.
One trick.
Yeah, literally. And she gets hit by a firework and all of a sudden she's completely blind and is disabled as well. And it's just like, it doesn't make sense at all whatsoever.
It's very much like we have to get to this point. We have 3 minutes of screen time left. What can we do?
Yeah.
Do you think they should have done with this what DC did with Batwoman?
Just don't release it.
Probably.
Yeah, I think so. They should have realized at some point. Look, I realize we've put $100 million into this. It's just not like this. Like, I don't understand the movie industry at all. Like, it seems like half the things they put out are just bad publicity and damaging to their brands. And apparently that's not the case. Otherwise, these companies would all be long out of business. But I don't see how they are better off releasing this.
Because
I guess by $50 million, but
yeah, this only leaves a bad taste in people's mouths for Kraven, which is coming out later. And again, this is a new character we're being introduced to, and obviously you then have like how people reacted to Morbius before that as well. It's just like you would have been better off just scrapping this and letting people. If you feel like Kraven is generally going to be a good movie or Venom 3 is going to be a good movie, then you completely scrap this and you just like let people go from some of the whatever movie they made before, which was actually Across the Spider-Verse, which was like a phenomenal movie, into like Kraven.
Yeah.
But do you guys genuinely believe word of mouth was a downfall of this film?
I mean, expectations were already at record lows, and then they just kept going. Like,
no one had an interest in the character as well. Like, no one is really that invested in Madam Web as a character anyway. So, for it to, like, be a character that people don't know, for the first trailer to get such bad, reactions from the public and for expectations to be extremely low, then yeah.
Well, that goes into my point. I think it's marketing, man. It's marketing that's actually the big reason why this. Well, we already established that the script wasn't too good.
I'd say the movie is the reason it's getting better for it.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I do think marketing has a big, had a big influence on the reason why the box office was such a flop. Because, like I said, like only one trailer, and from the trailer it was very dull. It was like, bro,
there's nothing redeemable to pull from the movie to put into a trailer.
Oh, come on.
How would you have sold this movie to people in a trailer to get people in seats and make more than £51 million, which I'm actually surprised they even made that much?
It's Final Destination meets Edge of Tomorrow. That's what it should have been from the start.
But what clips could you even pull from that?
You're making me go down memory lane. What highlight moments?
Because I'm sure they put the diner scene in there. They put like them in there, like comic book characters. They hinted at her like being able to rewind time and stuff like that in the trailer. And
they pretended that it's a movie with superheroes in it.
Yeah,
and that's kind of that's kind of one thing. The one silver lining that this is not actually that. That they don't put on the costumes halfway through and then just start fighting bad guys. But yeah, like the different trailers absolutely made it seem like this was, this had superheroes in it.
Did they did they have like do an emphasis on the villain? Because I think the mystery behind, when we see him in his costume, like, Spider-Man, that's the best thing that.
Yeah, the US Spider-Man thing was in the trailer, and it was.
Or was it emphasized on? Because I think it was only wasn't it showing like it's like one or two, like not even like I'm sure it wasn't shown more than 3 times at least. Maybe they could have gone that route where they they put they show him.
At that point the movie is already unsalvageable, but I don't know. I think they could have like this whole thing about us, a psychic trying to avoid fate kind of thing that actually has potential. and you could have sold it as that, and you would have made it should have made it very clear that this is not like even you could even lean into it and say this is not your average superhero movie. There is no CGI fight at the end. There is no blue sky laser. Like this is a fresh stand-up. Like they call it a standalone story already. That's already a meme. But like this is like a fresh take on somebody becoming a hero in a way that doesn't involve putting on tights and fighting a bad guy. Like that could have been their unique selling point and would have actually been true. It would still have been a garbage movie, but it would have been true.
Yeah, but would that have sold though? Because like a lot of people, fight scenes is,
Okay, so here's my. I wanted to bring this up at some point, and this seems like a good point. Is the audience full of hypocrites? Because the audience says we don't want like superhero movies are played out. They're all the same. There's always the blue sky laser at the end. It always comes down to a fist fight. It always comes down to simplistic morality of good versus evil. And then somebody and the other complaint would be that we're getting the same characters over and over again. We're getting Batman again. We're getting Spider-Man again. And now somebody comes along and makes a movie about a character that has not had a movie before, that has a different, that avoids all of those things and does something different. And then people complain that it doesn't have tights and fights, right? Is the audience in part to blame? Like leaving aside the quality of the movie itself, assume for a second this movie was still what it is, but good, right? And the movie was criticized for these things. Aren't we hypocrites for doing that?
No, 100%. But we have to understand that different isn't always good. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, I agree. The audience can be very biased. You know what I'm saying? They can be biased to films that are good, but they say it's terrible because it's different, and a lot of people don't like to change. They don't like to see different, especially like I think.
Well, it's the same people complain that it's not different. If it's different, they complain that it's not the same.
Exactly, which is why they're hypocrites. But at the same time, like I said, different isn't always good, man. Sometimes the different things that they do is
it's no guarantee.
Question for you, Daniel. Do you feel like if Eternal came out in this period as opposed to immediately after Endgame, when people were so used to the Titan fights, that's like big CGI battles and stuff like that, do you feel like Eternals may have done better in this period of time where we're getting like really bad superhero movies and then it tries to do something different? Because like you're on record for saying that you like Eternals. I'm a fan of Eternals and stuff like that. Do you feel like that could have worked in this period of time?
So Eternals lost close to $200 million at the tail end of the pandemic. I don't know that it would have made more. It might have made more. So it would have made more money because it wasn't during the pandemic. It would have made less money because it was further removed from the superhero hype. The problem with Eternals is kind of along similar lines as Madame Web, where it doesn't do the standard things that everybody complains about, but then it gets criticized for not doing the standard things, right? So I've seen almost all of the criticism I've seen of Eternals is that it's too talky, that there's no clear villain, there's not enough fights, there's not enough superpowers, and that is the reason that it's a good movie in my opinion, because first of all, all of these things are still there, but they're less than your average superhero movie. But the focus is very much on mostly internal character conflict. And in my opinion, so I don't want all superhero movies to be like Eternals, but I think it makes it a better movie because it has a very specific idea of what kind of movie it wants to be, and that deviates from the standard Marvel formula. And then people show up to it expecting the standard Marvel formula, they don't get it, they are disappointed, and they say it's a bad movie. And I think. I'm not sure if it would have done better or worse if it had come out in the past year. I think it wouldn't gotten a lot more attention because people would have looked out more for halfway decent superhero movies, and anybody giving the movie half a chance, I think, will recognize that the characters are the focus and not the fights. And maybe that means it would have found more of an audience.
Yeah. So my question wasn't really around the box office because obviously it was more in terms of like the reception of it.
Yeah.
So like, so you talking about like doing something different, doing something that isn't like your typical sort of like Marvel formula of like good guy, bad guy, big CGI battles and this, that, and the other. It was more so like because I feel like what Eternals suffered from as well is it's come out in a period where you've got things like you know, your Shang-Chi, you know, it's come out when you've had like things like the Spider-Man No Way Home, and like, you know, your people are fresh off of Endgame and stuff like that. So I feel like people were very much expecting that type of movie in that period.
They're like 2 years off of Endgame, and it came out before No Way Home. It was the last one to come out before No Way Home. So
Yeah.
at the time, people didn't have No Way Home to compare it to.
Okay, and that's fair enough. But I feel like people still had the expectations of the Marvel formula going into the movie. So like my question was more so like, now that we're like quite far removed from that, we've had so many ups and downs in this like current climate of like how people feel about comic book movies. Would it had like a better like would it have been better received? Not box office wise or anything like that, but like would it have been better received by the audience for doing something different and doing something a little bit more innovative?
So it's been 2.5 years, November 2021, since Eternals came out. I have not seen any reappraisals of it. I think it seems like people who liked it back then still like it, and people who disliked it back then still dislike it. I've not seen people go back. Like there's a world in which, you know, people are starving for halfway decent superhero movies. And so, you know, Blue Beetle wasn't it, Flash wasn't it, Marvels wasn't it. So they go back to maybe something they passed on 2 years earlier and realize, oh, hey, this Eternals thing is actually not bad. I've not seen one person say this. It seems to have gone down as the boring one that should not have been made.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
I'll be honest with you, that film wasn't memorable for me. I do remember when I watched it, I didn't really like it, but it wasn't a bad film. It just, I'm going to be a hypocrite. It was like, it did deviate from, you know, the formula of the emphasis on fighting. And that's generally what I go to look for. So is that wrong though? Because like,
it's not wrong, but I'm just saying people are constantly saying about how they want superheroes to branch out and tell more kinds of stories and not all devolve into a big fist fight at the end. And there's examples of.
I was going to say, you can still, it can still, you know, they can still have a fresh idea, but you can still incorporate the original formula.
Yeah, I mean, I could give examples of how to make a superhero movie that isn't the standard Marvel formula. For example, I think Wonder Woman should not have ended in a fight. The idea that you can beat the God of War in a fight is stupid. Wonder Woman should have won by convincing people to not fight. Right? That would have deviated from the standard formula. It's not Marvel, but it's still the standard superhero formula, and it would have been more interesting and more thematic and more satisfying. Just as one example. Or you can make
that might have not gone well with the audience though.
Like, didn't we have like something like that in Wonder Woman 2 where she's like getting everyone to like renounce their wishes and stuff like that, and it was just awful.
Yeah, but that movie had other problems, like this whole idea of wishes already being kind of not thought through and having a bunch of, you know, unfortunate implications if you think about it too hard and that sort of thing. In general, like, I have not seen Wonder Woman 1984, mostly because I skipped Wonder Woman through 1983, and I felt like I'd kind of missed the boat on that one. But you know, that basic idea doesn't sound too bad. It's just that it's in a movie that is already not doing well. I'm just saying, like, having seen Wonder Woman 1, I think the weakest part of it is the ending. And it is weak because it becomes the standard superhero fist fight. And the premise and who the antagonist is and who the hero is suggests a different approach to resolving the conflict. And even if people hadn't liked it in the moment, it would have at least been noticed as being something different. And always assuming that it was done well and that it works, I think it would have maybe gotten some backlash initially, but then eventually people would have come around and realized that actually, yeah, this makes sense and makes it a better movie. To give other examples, there, like the Ant-Man movies, like they end in a fight, but that one is more a heist movie than anything else, right? It, you know, maybe not the best heist movie ever made, but it leans into the heist movie because the character doesn't really lend himself to a big fight at the end. You know, I would still want, like, the Batman also ends in a big action spectacle scene, but like 95% of the movie is him doing an investigation and following clues, right? That one is not, like, if you're looking for, you know, an action slugfest, the Batman is the most boring thing ever. But if you're looking for a crime thriller, it's the most riveting thing ever. I think movie like the superhero genre lends itself to telling a whole bunch of different kinds of stories. And in the comics, like a Captain America comic is different from a Daredevil comic, is different from an X-Men comic, is different from a Superman comic. Even if they're unifying tropes and conventions, there's a huge range of stories you can tell in the genre, and the movies have barely scratched the surface.
I was gonna say I hate what you're. To be fair, has kind of like deviating from your root work, because for example, right, complete a whole different genre, but Night Swim was portrayed to us as a film that's going to have, a lot of jump scares, it's going to be a haunted mansion type of film, but it wasn't that. And obviously, like you mentioned before, Daniel, they tried something new, and you kind of liked the new thing that they tried, but a lot of people didn't resonate with it because this is not what they were looking for. So I hear what you're saying 100%, but a lot of the times what we're seeking for in superhero movies is different from, like you say, like you mentioned Batman, where it's crime-filled mystery, crime-filled investigation, investigation crime-filled, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But a lot of people, so it's a thing where a lot of people are looking for that whole, the whole fantasy fight scenes, because they want to have fun. They want to feel that, they want to feel that, what's the word? That adrenaline. Exactly. It was like, so I think if they did deviate from the formula, I do think, I hear it could work, but I don't think it has worked.
But early MCU did this.
It hasn't. Eternals didn't work. Night Swim, even though that's not even a superhero film, that's a whole, I'm saying, that didn't work.
Like, but like Daniel was mentioning, like the Batman was really well received, made money at the box office.
Which one?
You think
the recent one?
The recent one. If you think of even like
action-packed, though.
I wouldn't say it was action packed. I wouldn't say it was action-packed.
There were a couple of fight scenes in there, but it's 3 hours long, and about 2 hours 20 of that is Batman wandering about crime scenes.
Yeah. Like even if you think about
enough action though, it had enough action. Whereas Eternals, I didn't feel like it had enough action.
It's not non-stop action. Like it's not BVS. It's not Man of Steel or anything like maybe not the best examples, but point is, though, it's not an action focused movie. There's if anything, a criticism of the Batman is that the big action sequence at the end is kind of obligatory and feels a bit out of place. Not that it's bad, like I think it's very well shot, I think it's gorgeous, the use of light and shadow and everything, but it doesn't really fit the rest of the movie too well. Like plot-wise it's fine, but like stylistically and tonally it's very different. It feels like, okay, we kind of have to end this on an action sequence. But like what I was saying earlier, like the MCU actually did that. Like Captain America felt different from Iron Man, felt different from Thor, felt different from an Avengers movie. They all at the end of the day are action movies, and they still have the Marvel tone and all of that. But there was a much bigger variance in the early phases in terms of what kinds of movies they were making, and there was like a house style and there was like a through line, but they weren't all the same movie. I think that's a phase four thing, and that's been to the detriment of the MCU. I think they are capable of making, or the genre is capable of supporting a much bigger range of different kinds of stories and genres and tones and styles that have largely been ignored in favor of generic action comedy with quippy one-liners and green screen action. And that's why they all feel the same, and that's why people think that the genre is played out, even though I can name like half a dozen characters that haven't even been touched yet that I would really like to see, or types of movies that haven't been, like there has not been an equivalent of Winter Soldier in 10 years? When did Winter Soldier come out? When was the last time they made something with that tone and feel?
Even something like Logan, which I was going to mention before, like Logan's got action in it, but it's a completely like different type of movie than what's been made in any other sort of in the superhero genre as well. And like again, our next video that you're going to see on Monday or whenever it comes out is going to be about Marvel fatigue. So not Marvel fatigue, sorry, superhero fatigue in general. Do we feel like part of it is the formula, like part of it being the formula that everyone has decided to adopt? Because, at the start of it, the DCU was markedly different to what the MCU was trying to be. Granted, it didn't completely work out for them, being different from what Marvel was. but then they started to lean into sort of I don't want to say the silliness, but like again, like you said, the kind of like action comedy that like Marvel was going for in some of the later phases. It started to lean into that because it saw that that's what was making money and that's what sort of audiences were sort of showing up for. And then now every movie is trying to be the same movie essentially, and that's why people are getting a little bit tired of it. But, where you get things like, and again, within sort of the DCU failing, the one movie that did do well was the Batman, which was completely different, had a completely different tone to what all the.
Well, that's not in the DCEU, but it's like a DC movie.
It's like, it's like a DC movie basically. And I know that Batman is one of the most recognized characters from DC, anyways. But so is the Flash. Obviously, he's not on the same level as Batman, but so is the Flash, and the Flash did absolutely horrible, didn't even break even. Whereas like the Batman,
and the people who disliked the Flash movie the most were diehard Flash fans who just wanted to see a Flash movie and didn't get one.
Yeah,
I don't think it's the formula. I think they just be lazy with the formula. I don't think people are necessarily tired of it. I just think being lazy with the formula, because I don't believe that in order for them to introduce something new, it has to be at the expense of something old. Like, I think
it never is. Like again, like with all the movies that we've listed, like all the early Marvel movies, even like there's like good action in like the Logan movie. There's really good action in the Batman movie and stuff like that. Like you can tell.
By the way, Logan was great storytelling. Sorry, carry on.
Like fantastic storytelling, and it also had like really good action within the movie as well. It had like really good fight. It had like the Wolverine versus Wolverine fight scene, which was like epic. So you can do different types of again, you can lean into like loads of different genres via the comic book movie and like still have the action and still satisfy what people kind of like. You can satisfy multiple audiences with it. I
think they've kind of changed the formula. I feel like it's missing that maturity, because even like with Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2 and the whole Logan, it felt very like, even though it was accessible to majority of the public, different age groups, it felt just more gritty and more like emotionally you resonate more with the character. It just felt more like mature, whereas now it's very like Daniel mentioned before, like it's very comedic. Like they try and make with these one-line jokes, they try and make it very they've saturated it down to a more accessible level to not just, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, I think they've kind of, when it comes to the formula, I think they've kind of changed it, and they just made it less. They made it.
Is it like part of it as well, like them trying to bring in the new audience? Because obviously, like people that watched Iron Man 1 have like grown and matured and this and the other, and like have like grown older, and they're like then now trying to get like the new like generation to like the Marvel movies, which is why like pushing people like Miss Marvel, and they're trying to do like Kate Bishop. They're trying to like bring in
everyone.
Yeah, and it's just like, these are not the people that are coming out to see your movies. These are not the people that are like paying money to come and see your movies. And you're just catering to the wrong audience.
The big problem is that the movies are supposed to, all movies are supposed to be for everybody,
and it's not.
And that basically means that they all have to be the same. Like it would be fine if there was something for everybody in the MCU as opposed to one particular thing, and if you don't like that particular thing, then you're out of luck. Like there hasn't really been an MCU movie made for me, with the exception of Eternals, probably in 5 or 6 years, because it's all aimed at sensibilities that are just not mine. Like I still remember walking out of Thor Ragnarok with resentment, because I was realizing that I was never going to get a fantasy epic out of a Thor movie. Like the way they allude to a little bit in Thor 2, like there's a sequence at the beginning where they're out fighting giants in one of the 9 realms or whatever. And that's pretty much one of the only times we actually see Thor doing like classic mythology things. And stuff like that is in the comics more. And at that point, I kind of realized that I was never going to get that not from the MCU. And I'm not, it's not about it all being that, but it's like one by one, all the different tones and styles and subgenres, or the genres that previous movies had leaned into, kind of all went away into and collapsed into generic action comedy with quips. And that doesn't seem to be changing.
And that's how, like, in the early MCU, people had like different favorites. Like people like preferred Iron Man more. Some people preferred like Captain America more. Some people preferred like Thor more. Even like when Doctor Strange came in, even though he was like similar to what Iron Man was, but he was like slightly different in his own way. Whereas, like you're saying, everyone is the same character now, and it's either you don't like it, basically.
And that basically means you either like that one character or you like nobody.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the ingredients to why people have been falling off, because, you know, if, like, when was the last time they did something with Winter Soldier? For example, I think he's still on ice in Wakanda, or I don't even know.
You've been tapped out. No, they did the whole Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Oh yeah, there was the Disney Plus series that
don't watch it.
All right, okay, but like a character like that is markedly absent from the MCU. Is my point. Like, it wasn't specifically about Winter Soldier, but like a character like that. Like, Winter Soldier doesn't make quips, right? He's just a tragic character who's trying to piece his life together after being that's all. Like, we know the story. Point is, there aren't a lot of characters like him anymore in the MCU.
And like what Stanley said about like Spider-Man. Spider-Man's just a regular guy that's just going through like regular issues. He's like in high school. He's like having like women trouble. He's like having like rent trouble and like work trouble and this, that, and the other. He's just like a regular guy, and I don't feel like we're getting real people. We're not getting real people anymore in these comic book movies. Like the people
because they're storming straight into the action, where they feel like that's the selling point. Where it's not the selling point. Even though I did say, you know, I still want to see the action. You know, it just. Don't rush into it. Like, show us the character. You know what I'm saying? Let us invest into the character. They just completely. They said the same with Madam Web. They just completely just zoom past her story by just giving us, you know. Just,
well, I mean, since this is a Madam Web video, I mentioned this earlier, like about an hour ago, where I actually found it kind of refreshing that she wasn't that. Like, that was not her personality. She didn't make any jokes. She, seemed a bit awkward. She was a reluctant hero. It wasn't all a joke to her. And I think even through the really bad acting and bad directing and bad writing and all these different layers of terribleness, I could still see like an interesting person in there whose story I could have been on board with. And that, I think that is that's a very short list of redeeming features of Madam Web, but I think this is one. And but when you look at the discourse, especially leading up to the release of the movie, people were constantly talking about who asked for a Madam Web movie, why make a Madam Web movie, why don't you just give us a Spider-Man movie? Like, the sentiment was that it's ridiculous to tell new stories. And that really bothered me, because that's the death of the genre in general.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know why people just don't like change or just don't like seeing, new things being introduced.
Yeah. And I mean, like when Madam Web was announced, I said my first reaction, like everybody else, was really Madam Web. But ultimately, if we want new stories, then we have to be open to new characters, and those characters may not work. Like they did here. But we have to give them a chance.
But they choose the wrong character, though, which is what's baffling me even more. You've got like a whole plethora of freaking characters you can choose from, but they're just choosing like the characters which, like, it's hard to get into, liking this character.
I don't actually feel like there is a wrong character. I just feel like there's a wrong adaptation of the character, essentially. And I think we talked about this in the last video, like where you've got characters like Polka Dot Matt, or even like what's the guy from Across the Spider-Verse, the one that's like meant to be the Spot, like characters like that aren't meant to work. And obviously those are not like leads of movies, but even like down to like the Guardians of the Galaxy, like when that was probably coming out in the Marvel slate, people were probably like, who the hell asked for a Guardians of the Galaxy movie?
Yeah, they were obscure even in comics.
Exactly. But then once they are given to us, it's like, how are you presented? How are you making us want more Madam Web, essentially? Because like what we got is like, when we are never seeing Madam Web again for like another 100 years. It'll be another lifetime before they even try.
Maybe in 20 years there will be another one or something when people have forgotten about this. But my big point with that whole topic is always, most of the characters in the MCU were functionally new characters. Like, the average moviegoer who isn't really into comics doesn't know anything about Doctor Strange, for example, or the Eternals are extra obscure, even more obscure than the Guardians of the Galaxy. But like Shazam, Ant-Man, Black Adam, these are all characters that have existed for decades and have lots and lots of stories, but they're not in the public consciousness. So when somebody makes a Doctor Strange movie, functionally that's a new character, because most people watching that movie have not heard of or seen or thought about Doctor Strange before. They're being presented with a new character that they need to be won over by. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Like with Doctor Strange, it worked. With Black Adam, it didn't. But the point is, you just have to keep trying, and you run with your successes and you move on from the failures. But that's how that's supposed to work. And if we reject categorically the idea of adapting a fringe character, then we deprive ourselves of that opportunity. Blade is really obscure and fringe. And in '98, somebody just made a movie about him because they had an idea, and it worked, and it's one of the greats. But it fails the test of who asked for a Blade movie.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't blame the audience for it. I feel like people always want what they're familiar with. Like people want more of things that they enjoy, want more things they like, and people really like Spider-Man and stuff like that. So I don't feel like it's the audience's fault. It's down to the studios, the movie directors, the writers, and stuff like that to give us something new to care about.
Yeah, and I like Batman too, and I don't like, as far as I'm concerned, there hasn't been a good Batman movie since 2008. So I kind of missed the character, even though there's been a bunch of movies actually made. They just weren't for the most part, just weren't any good. As far as I'm concerned, I didn't get any enjoyment out of them. But I want Batman movies and I want Polka Dot Man movies, right? And it all comes down to, do you have a story to tell? You shouldn't make a Batman movie if you don't have a story to tell. One of the reasons why the Nolan trilogy worked so well is because Christopher Nolan looked at Batman, looked at the characters, and had an idea for a trilogy of movies. Now, I think the first two work much better than the third one, but overall, those movies worked because they had a vision. And back when Batman Begins came out, nobody thought that a grounded origin story that is basically by volume, 3/4, the logistics of how Batman got his costume, was going to be compelling to anybody, much less having the villains be Ra's al Ghul and Scarecrow. None of that is intuitive, but Christopher Nolan had an idea for a story, and he told that story, and he told it well, and it went down as one of the great successes. And I don't know what the box office was, but across those three movies, at least $2 billion, whatever the number is. But the point is, we were won over by his vision for that character, but we also weren't won over by Zack Snyder's vision of that character, because it wasn't a good vision, at least in my opinion. So it all comes down to, do you have a story to tell, and how well known the character is kind of incidental to that.
Oh, guys, I think we've spoken enough.
I was gonna say back to vague threats to James Gunn.
Yeah, get this one right, please.
Superman Legacy, because I've never been a Superman fan ever. Even though I do like Man of Steel, I've never really been a Superman fan. He's just he's too OP and it's not really interesting. But
my take is there has never been an excellent Superman movie. The good one, the Donner Superman movies have a great Superman and a terrible story. And the Snyder movies have great effects and a terrible Superman. But there has never been a Superman movie where the Superman is good and the story is good and the production values are good. And so Superman Legacy has a niche to fill, in my opinion, and I think that's it.
No pressure, James Gunn.
Well, I was going to ask for last thoughts, but I think we've kind of brushed that. You know what I'm saying? Brushed over that. So... yeah. Well, not
it's
not
not
covered it.
It's not.
What I can ask is ratings, final ratings. What would you rate the film?
What did I give The Beekeeper?
Which was wrong, by the way, but I think he gave it a very low score.
I give it a 1. I'll give this a 1.5 because The Beekeeper is still the movie I hate the most this year. So I'll give it a 1.5.
Guys, you guys are freaking crazy, man. But it is what it is. Okay, Daniel, what are you rating, Madam Web?
I give it a 5 out of 30 if I have to give it a rating. I don't I think I said I don't remember which movie it was. It might have been Night Swim, where I say we can't really judge this because it's not a complete movie, or it's not it's not a real movie. And I kind of was hasty with that because I didn't anticipate something like this. Honestly, on a big part of my grievance with this movie is just that it's not a working product, right? It should not have been released like this. It should have been recorded. It should have been fixed or not released at all, because there's nobody is helped by releasing a bad movie. If the movie doesn't work, then either fix it, or if it's not fixable, then don't release it, in my opinion. And Madam Web doesn't pass that test at all. It's not even a bad movie. It's just not. It's not it somehow died in its own production process. And that is rare for even bad movies. And I don't know that you can even give that a rating, because giving it a rating assumes that it's a movie.
Damn. Okay. Well, for me, I want to give this a 5 out of 10. It was average.
Are you high?
Sorry, guys.
I think he's tired. I think John's tired.
Guys, look, man. Listen, I
What's
didn't know.
a 3 out of 10 for you?
What's a 3 out of 10? You said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for you. What deserves a 3 out of 10? If this is a passing grade.
I haven't. Well, it is a passing rate because when I left the cinema, I didn't feel like I wanted a refund. You know what I'm saying? If I don't feel like I want a refund, then that's a 5. That's at least a 5 out of 10 for me. This was average.
It's the worst movie you've ever seen, and what rating do you give it?
The worst movie I've ever seen.
Black Adam?
No, that's definitely, bro. You know what? Black Adam was. It was better than Madam Web, but it wasn't.
Yeah, it's at least something.
I don't even remember. You know, that's a good question. I think that should be on
Like,
Monday.
if you had to come up with a 2 out of 10 movie, gun to your head, name a 2 out of 10 movie, or else, what do you say?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. What has been a 2 out of 10 film for me? I can't think of one now.
I just want to calibrate the scale, because giving it something like this, like 5.
Daniel,
The reason it's 5 for me is because it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. It wasn't memorable. It was just one of those films I was like, listen, I see that the audio is messed up, and I can see that the story is, the dialogue terrible. It's it's not a great film, but it wasn't terrible, man. It wasn't to the point where.
Yeah. Well, what have we been arguing about for the last 90 minutes?
Well, no, I've been pretty. I wouldn't say partial, but I acknowledged its flaws. Well, I know its faults, and I'm pretty much blaming more of the business side rather than
Yeah, but it's a final product that counts, right?
Yeah, and with the final product, I wasn't pissed. I wasn't angry. I was just like, oh, this film's. No,
That brings me back to my original question: what would make you angry?
Daniel, while he's thinking, gun to your head. Daniel, gun to your head. The room. Sorry. No, the room, wait. Sorry. Daniel, gun to your head. The Room or Madam Web? What are you watching?
So, I don't really believe in so bad it's good movies. Like, I don't enjoy watching The Room. Like, for me, actually, The Room, I get a lot of less enjoyment out of The Room than most people, apparently. Mm-hmm. Because, like, you watch The Room once and you say, okay, I understand this was made by an eccentric weirdo who has never talked to a human being before. And there's some weird lines in here, but that's kind of it. That's kind of the joke. With Madam Web, you can kind of see like the remnants of like what it once used to be. And you can see like bits of intention here and there, but they all conflict. And you can see, okay, this is from the second time it was revamped, and this is from the fourth time it was revamped. And this is where they ran out of money, and this is where they ran out of time. And it's almost like a forensic puzzle. Like Madam Web is, to me, it's not a movie, it's a forensic puzzle. Like this should be taught in film schools in terms of just, okay, here's a case study of, here's a movie where everything goes wrong. Let's spend a semester picking through every little bit, one frame at a time. And to me, that is more interesting than a movie that is just weird in a bad way.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I have to choose between Madam Web and The Room, I choose Madam Web because it's a more interesting car wreck than The Room is.
How's The Room?
On like what you were saying there, this should be shown to execs of what not to do and how to not meddle into sort of know what your creatives are trying to do when creating a movie.
I don't know if there's like university courses for being a film producer. There must be. I don't know if it's like a course you can take.
It's not. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But if it is, then like every aspiring filmmaker should, I think, study the big successes of their field. So when I did physics in university, right? So I've never taken a creative arts class in my life. But when like we actually spent a fair amount of time in physics class talking about the big failures and the big scams of science, and especially physics, like things that were just went wrong, like where like an entire generation of scientists was just wrong about something and why they were wrong and how they figured out they were wrong and how to fix it. Because you can learn like from other people's mistakes, you can learn about how to avoid them. And so anybody who has any passing interest in making movies or understanding movies. Like, I'm just saying this as an enthusiast, right? I just have an interest in like stories and how they work and what the difference is between a good story and a bad story. But if you, I think, in my opinion, and the only person who should watch this is somebody who wants to be a filmmaker, because this filmmaker, this person would learn all the ways in which you can be screwed over by the system, and what circumstances can lead to a terrible product. Even I have no doubt that the people involved in this movie put a whole bunch of time and effort and sweat and tears into this project, and it still came out garbage because the circumstances under which this movie were made were so stifling and so counterproductive that it could not really have turned out any other way. Like I said earlier, I think if you put Christopher Nolan in charge of Madam Web, he also would have turned out something maybe slightly better, but still terrible, because under those circumstances you just cannot make a movie. And on that level, it's interesting.
What film is The Room? God damn.
You look it up. It's a classic.
You might bring it as your best thing watch next week. Let's see.
Yeah, I highly recommend it.
Well, guys, I'm not even gonna carry on. Like I said, I gave it a 5. It was a terrible, but it was.
Have you thought of a 2 out of 10 movie yet?
I have a 4 for 2 out of 10 movie.
Okay, that's homework for next week.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's cool. But guys, thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode.
If you've seen Madam Web, we're sorry.
Well, what will we review next week?
Episode 1 of the new Avatar: The Last Airbender. So just completely different thing. Should be interesting.
Cool. Well, guys, thank you very much.
Similar for Arcane when it comes out towards the end of the year. Daniel, have you watched Arcane first season?
I'm still stuck on like episode 3. It's one of those shows where I can clearly see the quality. I'm just not getting into it.
Oh my god!
And one day, like, I have a couple of shows where I tried several times over the course of years to get into it, and then the last time I tried, it just clicked, and it ended up being one of my favorite things ever. Could probably do a Monday topic about that someday. But yeah, I have a couple of examples of those, and Arcane may very well be one of those one day, but not yet.
So have you watched episode 3 or have you not watched it?
I think I'm halfway through episode 3 or something.
Okay, I feel like you probably need to get, because like the way that it was structured is like 3 acts. So you've got like episode 1, 2, and 3, which is like act 1, and it's like kind of like own self-contained like story, which then like leads on to like obviously what happens afterwards. And you got like 4, 5, and 6, which is its own like sort of build up of stories, and then 7, 8, 9, which is like the conclusion of like everything. And I feel like you need to like complete the act and then like move on, because it like the story does mature and it gets like so much better.
Yeah, I've been told it's amazing, and
I'm telling you again.
It's clearly a quality show, and I've just not been able to care yet, but I will keep trying.
Please.
I felt the same way with Breaking Bad. I still can't get into it. Or maybe it's gonna be a thing at the last moment where I'm gonna end up liking it. But yeah, I'm still stuck on episode 2. But okay, guys. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in.
Like, share, subscribe, share, comment. If you liked Madam Web, then please dislike this video. If you didn't like Madam Web, then feel free to like the video.
No, you can actually still like the video if you like Madam Web. Because, I didn't say it was terrible. I said it was average, but it is what it is. You know what? I actually preferred Madam Web to Night Swim.
Why is that?
Okay, I think that's what. Okay, I'm gonna have to gather my thoughts.
Call your bluff.
Okay. You didn't expect me to lie.
Well, you know what, guys? Oh, I'm gone. I'm out.
Yeah, let's maybe cut our losses. See you next week.
Ciao.